So we might be back online if you guys can see us. For whatever reason, it was cut out.
Somebody didn't want us talking about lasers.
Right. So let's see if anybody in the chat can tell us that you can see us. That would be appreciated.
I see something coming up.
Yep. Sound is good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, it seems like it's
Yeah,
populating.
I don't know why.
All right, I'm going to try again. Let's see what happens. Okay. So what I was talking about was the, cross your fingers, argon ion lasers. And basically, the problem with them regarding this type of application is extremely low efficiency, on the order of 1/10 of 1%. A kilowatt for one output, 1 watt of output. They're totally ineffectual for this kind of purpose. Of all of the older lasers that would have been an even possibility in this type of application would have been a carbon dioxide laser. These things can get up to about 25 or 30% efficiency, and they're very powerful. But their very long wavelength means that the optics have to be made out of special materials, and they have a very, very large optical design in order to get the beam through the system. And so really, it's only with the advent of diode lasers and now with diode pump fiber lasers that we can effectively build directed energy systems that could be deployed in a remote environment. If everybody can hear me, then
They can.
I appreciate your sticking with us for the few minutes while we were dealing with this. I don't know whether or not, again, it was malicious from somebody up on top or if it's just one of our screw-ups.
Yeah, it seems good. Everybody's back in the chat.
Oh,
so,
good. Thanks for hanging in there.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Had to start a new stream, though, which is not nice. But, okay, argon laser again. Someone said diffusion. I'm trying to see if there's something else. When are you going to post the video on the centrifuge?
Well, actually, we've got a couple of videos that we're sort of balancing back and forth. Alex is going to be doing a video in a couple of weeks or a week or a month, something on that order, regarding some computer stuff that really is beyond me, and I'm not even going to get into the details of it, but that's something he's working on. The centrifuge laser is going to either be the next laser or next video, or we're going to use it in the next video and then get into the details about how to build it, which I think is what we're going to do. So my suspicion is that'll probably be posted in about a month, and we'll probably do 1 or 2 videos before that. That's a good guess.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, everybody, for coming back. And thanks for all of the appreciation here.
Yeah, really, really appreciate it.
Yep.
While you're looking at that, let me get into a little bit more with anybody who's interested about why fiber lasers have become sort of like the go-to and why that's going to be the future of directed energy systems. They are extremely efficient primarily because the pump light is incredibly efficient. The diode pump modules, like I showed you in the video, these things can get up to like 75, 80% conversion efficiency. They're extremely efficient. The only downside of directly using the diodes, like we used in the first video we did about a year ago, is the beam quality is rather poor. And that means there's a lot of aberrations, not just the spherical aberration that I showed you how to deal with or the astigmatism, but they've got multiple modes. They can have a coma where they have more light on one side of the circle than the other side. They can tend to even drift over time. And a couple of the methods that they're going to be using, or that they do use, we probably will not need to do this, is to combine the output of multiple beams. Because about the most powerful single fiber laser that you can get practically is about 10 kilowatts. And that's unusual. More typically, they're around 6 kilowatts, which is a lot of power. I mean, that's kind of the range we're dealing with here, but it's not enough to be able to take down a missile from, 4 kilometers away. You need hundreds of kilowatts, so you have to combine them. And the neat thing about the fiber lasers is that they offer the opportunity to take super high quality beams and combine them in a super high quality beam, not just put them side by side, which is what we're going to do here with our 2 lasers. There's an argument for doing that because of the simplicity. But the individual fibers can actually be coupled together using a few different interesting properties of light that allow you to sort of co-align or to overlap beams so that you get a single beam coming out with 500,000 watts in it. And that is something that the fiber optic lasers make very easy to do. You see, the individual fiber lasers can actually be fiber amplifiers. They don't have to be just sources. They can amplify a weak beam and make it much more powerful. So if the initial seed laser, the single seed laser, produces a good quality output, that can be divided up without losing the coherence or the cooperation of the individual beams. They're still in phase with each other. They still have exactly the same wavelength. They go on at the same time. They go off at the same time. These can be then divided into a whole host of amplifier lasers that can just build up that signal, and then they can be recombined into a single output to produce a very high quality, very small beam. That's one way of doing it. And the fibers make that possible because they can operate as sources and as amplifiers. And you can buy them that way. This is not experimental.
And one question before we get to LM, and LM, thank you for the 22. What is the watt output of the fiber lasers that you were using?
Yeah, these are 1,600 watt each, and we were running it at a kilowatt for the test. We only ran the one laser for the test just because there was no real reason to produce a double beam, and they're identical to each other, so we could essentially produce 2 identical beams with 2 identical outputs, but they would be 50% stronger each. The reason we're simply doing that is we wanted to get the extra power, and when you get above the 2,000 watt range, generally when you get to 2,000 watts, you go to 3-phase. And we didn't have 3-phase power available here, and so, and also 308 volts. So it gets into a little bit sketchier in terms of where we could put these. We didn't know that we would necessarily have this room for that long to be able to test them, or if we wanted to move them to a different site to demonstrate them. So bottom line is 3,200 watts combined on target. What you saw was 1/3 that.
Yeah, okay. And LM, again, thanks for the 22. But really, ask a question in the future because we definitely appreciate it. Thanks for live streaming and for all that you do on your channel. It's like,
you're
thank
welcome.
You.
We enjoy it too.
Yeah.
And this is actually a lot of fun because I like discussing lasers, as you can imagine.
Yeah. And then Ollie, I assume it's the same. Same Norwegian guy that we talked to. So he asked, have you considered a multi-layer absorbing system, ? Carbon/graphite front absorber with copper block back absorber with massive water cooling through phase
change.
Phase cooling. Or maybe like some. Sorry, my eyes are not great.
That's small printing.
Or maybe like some have suggested some sort of diffuser.
Yeah. Number one, when Alex had mentioned, as we had talked to him before, he's one of our big Patreon supporters, and we have a feature where we will actually do one-on-one Zoom calls with our top Patreon clients, simply because of the fact that that support is what makes this possible. They paid for these lasers, so we appreciate that. So we sometimes do one-on-one Zoom calls through the Patreon. But basically, I think that idea has some merit, but I think you're over-engineering it. I don't think it has to be as sort of sophisticated on each layer. What a couple of commenters had put in the post below the video that we did this morning are kind of what we were thinking of doing and may actually end up doing, which is you get an outer layer that's structural, something like the MDF or even drywall. Then you put a thick layer, not a towel, but a thick layer like the ballistic gel or cucumbers, and then another supportive layer behind. So you've basically built a fruit sandwich. The idea is that we need this to be relatively low cost because a lot of the comments sort of focus on how you can build a beam dump. How could you just get rid of the energy? Well, we could do that by simply setting up 3 or 4 concrete blocks. But we have to cover over 20 square meters of wall surface. And so it has to be cheap and reasonably light enough that 2 guys can move it around when we're done or we're setting up. So something that is light and relatively inexpensive was a key parameter. And so it may be that rather than just soaking the boards, we use the boards as mechanical supports, and they support something like the gel or, say, wet cloth or wet vermiculite or something that's got a lot of water, a dense, a heavy amount of water. That is a good option. And it may be that with those soaked boards, when we put 2 layers together, it's still going to be a little bit sketchy. What we may do is leave the boards in most of the areas because we're unlikely to hit them. They're at the periphery of our field of fire. But then in the middle, we may end up putting a multi-layer sandwich with something in between that can absorb the material. We do not want to reflect because we're going to have multiple people around here and we're going to have all these cameras and computers, and we don't want to be sending a beam willy-nilly back to hit somebody or an expensive piece of equipment.
Yeah. Okay. And then Lucas, very similar to what you were just answering. So Lucas, thanks for the 5. How large of an array is required to be in danger of forming a quantum-sized black hole?
Maybe a third one would do it. No, I think, who is it? Brian Cox was talking about that on, was he on PBS? I forgot where I saw him, but the amount of energy is like, tens of orders of magnitude too high. But one thing that you can see with pulsed lasers, I thought we might be able to push this at its very highest beam quality, but you typically need to get to around the 40 gigawatt per square centimeter range to ionize air. Perfectly clear air, no particles, nothing. Just the field, the electronic field that's associated with light. Light is both photons and electronic field. They're coupled tightly. They're the same thing. The field becomes great enough that it will literally rip electrons off of the atoms at about that intensity. And when you produce that kind of beam, you'll actually get a little spark that forms in the air. And I've seen this many times with pulsed lasers because they put all that energy into a very short period of time. They can reach that 40 or 50 gigawatt range. We probably are only getting up to around a gigawatt or 2 with this continuous wave laser, so we can't see that. A black hole? No.
Yeah. And then just something that I even thought about, but Jessamy, I thought about this. Why not just use a tank of water?
You could. Again, once you start engineering it, like if you actually say, I told you, here's a few bucks and here's the room you have to protect. You have to think about a wall that's maybe has to be 12 feet or 4 meters high and maybe about 5 or 6 meters wide. If it's a tank of water that high, you've got a fair pressure at the bottom. So if you fill it with just free-flowing water, you're going to need a pretty strong structure at the bottom to contain that. And then once you puncture the wall, now you've got like the Red Bull can, it's spraying into the room and you're going to have to plug it. So you want the water to somehow be absorbed or trapped in a material so you don't get the hydrostatic pressure and you don't get the leakage. And that's why the gel, the fruit, they all work. And that's why if we were to soak something in between 2 boards, the boards are just to sort of keep it from flopping over. But the water needs to be retained even as you're drilling a hole through it.
Sure. And then we also got another one. I'm not sure if it's a Felipe or a Philip. But either
Forgive
way,
us.
yeah, sorry. But thanks very much for the 50. What do you think is the best modulation technique for sending information with a laser beam?
This is kind of moving more into Paul's realm than my realm,
Right.
but typically, I think what they're using with, say, chip-based transmission is simply modulating by amplitude. I don't think they're doing frequency modulation to send information. I could be wrong about that, but we're talking nanowatts, and we're talking either intra-chip from one component to another, or you're talking into a fiber. So I think I should probably just not even go any further, because I'm going to be guessing, and you probably know already more about this than I do. So I'm going to claim ignorance on that one.
Yeah, and if you want to add to that question,
Yeah.
we could definitely respond to it.
Because the laser part of it I can deal with, but a lot of the microelectronics and their interfacing with laser, it's a fascinating field, but it's deep.
Yeah. And there's a few people like Oleg is responding to him.
Okay.
For example, like he responded to Felipe or Philip for simple and inexpensive systems, direct intensity modulation, on-off keying. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's how these work. If, for example, if we want to run these in a pulsed mode, it's not really pulsed in terms of gathering energy up and then sending out a big pulse and then gathering energy up and sending out a big pulse. That's normally what you think of in a pulsed laser. Modulating a laser is literally like putting a card in front of it, then letting it go, and then putting up a switch. Modulation is great, but obviously you're dumping all of that energy into the barrier when you're not using it, so it's somewhat inefficient. But these are made to be modulated because they're for metal cutting. So say you want to punch a whole bunch of holes into a piece of metal, they can go up to 1,000 hertz or a kilohertz in individual on-off sequences in order to be able to do that kind of operation. But it's not a pulsed laser, it's modulated. I think with respect to intercommunications, if that's what we were talking about, those are modulated. They're not pulsed because they don't need more energy at any point. They just need a given amount of energy to get through and then stop it. Where it gets more subtle is it threshold? Do they run them at 60% and then they run them at 65 to give a yes-no bit information? And also, do they redirect them? They may also be multi-wavelength too. They may be also transmitting at several wavelengths so they can use the same fiber for 3 data streams. It gets deep.
Yeah, okay. And I want to respond to a bunch of other questions, but Angela, thanks for the 2. Would hydrogel coating on a drone protect it?
Yeah, but again, like this is what I like about the engineering.
Okay.
Think about the weight, because you saw like how quickly it took to get through, say, 3 centimeters of the fruit. But you can imagine that if you had a thin layer of material like the hydrogel or the gelatin that we made, you're going to get very, very brief absorption of water. About 3 months ago when I did the video on looking for help, I showed you that towel that we had cut through. It was instantaneous, a soaking wet towel. Now imagine wrapping a wet towel around a drone. The protection is going to be minimal, but the extra weight is going to mean shorter battery life, less payload. So I think probably the best defense would be reflective, because that weighs almost nothing. And you can make them over a fairly broad wavelength, and almost all the fiber lasers are going to be operating at about 1 micron, so that makes it kind of easy. Metals work well, it's predictable. I would make them reflective.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find something new here.
But also another thing about reflective
Yeah.
is that, generally speaking, we're talking metal. And radar then becomes a very, very dangerous way of... it makes it very easy for radar to be able to see these drones. First of all, you can see them visibly. They're not dark and absorbent and matte. so you could see them with illumination, with lights, moonlight, starlight even. Plus, they're going to show up like stars on a radar screen because that microwaves just love to reflect off of metal. So it's going to be a challenge, and it may end up being that the best defense is going to be drone swarms, just huge numbers, and the battle is going to go back and forth. These things are getting faster and faster and faster. You're going to have to add more and more drones in order to get the one or two through that you want. Each side is going to have to decide, the one that wins the war is the richest. So the idea is to leverage your expense and make the other side pay more than they can afford to win.
Yep. And Dale H., thanks for the comment. But yes, we're still doing the centrifuge video.
Yeah.
You can't really see it behind here. I mean, you might be able to see that. But if you were subscribed to the Patreon page, you might have seen that, and that's why you're asking about it.
Yeah, I was just doing a small adjustment on the Patreon page. It was a little extra video clip that might not be interesting enough to make a whole video about me putting a pulley on. But what we did originally is after we built it, and I was certain it was going to work, certain enough that we only stood behind about 4 barriers. And then I ran it up to a speed we never intend to run it at, just to make sure that we didn't see any weird vibrations, nothing got loose, motor didn't get hot. But then I decided for operational purposes, the way you would use it if you built one, I geared it down. So I essentially enlarged one of the pulleys to produce a smaller or a larger ratio between the motor and the centrifuge. And I was installing the pulley and showing a few tricks in adjusting belt length and things that you would do if you work on motors and pulleys all the time. But it's an interesting skill.
Yeah, and I just have to block someone if you don't mind. Continuing.
Take your time.
Yep.
So with respect to the centrifuge, part of the reason for building the big centrifuge wasn't just to demonstrate centrifuges, but it was to try to make the design sort of intuitive enough that if someone said, oh, that's a good idea, I could do that, you don't actually have to build it the way that I did. It's a guideline. It works, it's effective, but you may have other modifications. You might want to make it bigger or smaller. You might also decide that you don't want to mount it the way that we did. One of the tricks I'm going to tell you at the end of that video, but I'll reveal it now, is that the way we have it set up, it makes it great for the video and you can see what's going on. But the way I recommend operating it is going to be not in the horizontal plane, but in the vertical, simply because it would allow you to tuck it against a back wall in a garage or a shop. It could be running for days in the background. It doesn't take up any space, and if any kind of liquid were to leak out of your bottles or something, it would all stay in that plane. That's what I'm going to recommend at the end of that video. So there's a lot of sort of the learning, thinking process behind it, some of the tricks that we used, as well as some modifications that you can then make once you have that background.
Okay. It's something interesting by AO.
Okay.
AO. Thanks for thanks.
AO.
Yeah, thank you. Is a favorite duo on YouTube. Yeah, that's cute. Thank you. But how about keeping the backstop moving constantly using some kind of motor? Keep up the great work. So, like, for example, it's like you were doing the bread during the video.
Right.
And it stopped it from poking through. So
It's a good question. It all comes down to, I think, this fundamental issue of when we test these things and we're showing you, you get the idea that we're talking about small scale. So, for example, it would have been easy to just move the cart back and forth. You could have just done this, and you could probably have blocked the beam during the entire demonstration with a piece of 2x4. You probably could have gotten away with that. The problem is we have to cover a field. It's somewhere between 20 and 23 square meters. So it's such a large area to try to shift that whole field, or to have all these individual little segments kind of sliding around. There's motors, the weight, you want it stable, you don't want it plopping down on somebody. It's not really a practical solution. Although it would be a good one, it would work if we had the motor power and wanted to build this huge construct. So that's part of the reason our solution is kind of old school.
Yeah, okay. And then Ostrike, thanks again for the 5. So request FAA and TFR test drones outside directly overhead, surround laser with thick aluminum plates, it should be plates, tall enough in case laser falls over or aims down.
That would be good protection for a user who is planning to do that. Obviously, like I've said, we're not going to use this outside. I mean, there are a few ways that we could get into serious trouble with these lasers, and that is a real good one. And it's unethical because these beams, you saw just a fraction of the amount of power that the 2 lasers can make, and something goes wrong. Just things go wrong. Things blow up. Things don't do what you expect. And to be just pointing them into the air or willy-nilly, even though you think you don't see anything up there, you might not. I mean, with the beam quality that we're talking about here, even a pilot at, 35,000 feet, you could damage the plane with that, or you could hurt somebody's eyes. It's that bad, and you don't even hear that plane, and you're not paying attention as you're focusing on your project, at 50 meters above the ground. So outside is it's not an option. We're not going to do that. I'm making that announcement. We're not going to do this outside. That's unwise. But dealing with the room that we have here, we're pretty lucky that we've got a large enough space that we can actually have a firing field in front of a protective barrier. We're not trying to build something we're going to sell, okay? That isn't the purpose. If we were doing that, we wouldn't be making the videos, and we would be working for a company that has contracts and lawyers and all the rest of that stuff.
That's fine.
We're not going to do that. What we're trying to do is give people enough knowledge that they don't have a fantasy about the capabilities of these systems, and also disregard them thinking, that's just Star Wars, it's government contractors trying to make a lot of money. There is real potential in fiber laser defense systems that are complementary to the ones that already exist. It doesn't replace. But when you think about the fact that this thing could fire literally thousands of rounds per second, and because of the weight of the mirrors that direct it being so light, there's no turret of any type of projectile launching device, I don't want to use the word on YouTube, that can move anywhere close to that speed because they're moving so much mass. So for very, very high speed, and very, very high rate of fire, with the only consumable being diesel for the generator, you can imagine how that might complement something else that's maybe heavier duty, longer range, has different types of applications. It fits a really good niche in there. And so that's one of the reasons why we want to make sure that everybody's aware of that, so that they have a knowledge about, okay, how would this go in? If some senator is saying, we should or shouldn't support this, well, it isn't just based on trust. It's like, I saw this video and they showed me that it can't or can do this. I don't know why I should be supporting or not supporting this sort of program, because I actually know how they work better than he does. So that's why we're doing this. It's educational. It's fun. It's fun to see this thing work. I mean, it's really gratifying, but it's really to kind of get everybody up to the same level, so that when we make policies in the future, people are coming into it with a level of knowledge.
Yeah. And Ollie, thanks again. You're really, you should be a mod or something like that.
Yeah.
But so he said, maybe then for budget, current boards coated with fire retardant, non-reflective paint in many layers? ? Some flat black mineral based or silicone-based coating? ?
Yeah, the problem is absorption versus reflection. We can cut tungsten with no effort with this thing. It'll go through basically any material. And so really what's doing it is mass. You have a certain number of joules per second, and if the material does not reflect the energy, it's got to be in the material, and it'll reach sufficient temperature to melt any known substance almost instantly. It's just a matter of how long it takes to dump those number of joules into the layer. So there's no magic coating when you're talking about absorption that's going to block these things. Really what you're looking for is either to reflect them, which is not our goal, or if the layer that you hit will somehow disperse the energy into the material, not reflect it out, to spread that heat over a larger mass. And the greater the mass, the more energy that can be absorbed before you reach a melting or a burning or an ignition temperature. So one of the neat things about the water-containing materials is that they don't block the beam. They allow it to get into there where there's a whole bunch of water droplets and steam and seeds and all the other stuff that you have inside of there that are vaporizing and turning into a cloud. This spreads the light energy into the rest of the cucumber, and the cucumber will grow warm, but there's a lot of thermal mass in a 1 kilogram cucumber. And so that's why the absorption and the mass are important. Super special surfaces aren't really going to make any difference because they have to absorb the energy and the temperature just goes up like crazy. It's really a linear thing, and reflection is not an option. That's why starlight is something that we didn't want to use, which was I don't know if it was an invention, but it was certainly popularized by Nighthawk and Light a little while ago. I love that video. It's a great material, but it's extremely reflective. So for the purposes of protecting everybody in the room, we don't want something reflective, but it's also not that heavy. And so whatever is absorbed is going to raise the temperature substantially. It's not probably a good option for this application, but it was a great option for sunlight.
Yeah, okay. And another one, and I know I'm going to say this wrong. Felix, thanks for the Canadian 7. Did you consider pryolizing
the bread?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So did he already ask about that?
No, but I knew where he was going.
A loaf of bread into carbon foam and using that as a shielding material.
Yeah, part of the reason for carbonizing or pyrolyzing, but basically what you're doing is you're burning off all of the non-carbon organics and the water, and you end up with an extremely light carbon foam. I don't know if Nighthawk and Light did this or it was Styropyro or somebody.
I think both of them did that.
Yeah,
actually.
You take a piece of toast and you really toast it, and I mean really toast it till you end up with just this ugly piece of black carbon. It's a foam. So its great strength is that it's a good insulator because it has a lot of air spaces or very long circuitous paths through the thickness of the material for the heat to be transported from one side to the other. Carbon has an extremely high melting point, so you could use it at very high temperatures and you would be able to insulate the other side. I think that's why people will take blowtorches with these carbonized or pyrolyzed pieces of toast, and they can blast the blowtorch right at their hand for a brief period of time because of the insulating properties. But the fundamental problem in this situation is the amount of heat that is going to have to be absorbed by that carbon in that localized spot will instantly vaporize the carbon. There's no water to absorb it, there's no mass. And so it would punch through that carbon almost instantly. You're doing that when you think about it in real time when you're blasting a hole through the piece of bread. You're carbonizing it on the way through and driving out all of the water along with all the carbon particles and everything else. It's not really a good option because we don't care about insulation. That's not an issue, so there's no real advantage of that. A solid block of carbon or graphite would do better, albeit with a lot more weight.
Okay. And then something that Felipe or Philip, thanks.
You're going to have to at some point decide.
Well, I don't know which one, but thanks for the 50. But this might be a more difficult question for you.
All right.
Because I might want to get in on this. In your opinion, what time period do you think was the greatest time for science from the 1600s up until now? Yeah, you think?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you see.
Yeah, see, the thing is, I'm a bad one to ask because of my interest in science. Like it might be, when you think of Van Luden, like the discoverer of the cell, Van Leeuwenhoek, I think it was, might have had the most significant like impact practically with the very early biological understanding of microbes, seeing them under a microscope for the first time, the cause of disease, and how many people might have been saved by that kind of invention. Now, that's not an era necessarily, but it's a real high point in sort of human knowledge evolution. My own prejudice, because I'm very much into the hard physical sciences, is sort of the era beginning with Einstein and, moving through Friedman and, a whole bunch of these more recent investigators from, say, the 20s to the 40s and the 50s. This was a great time in sort of modern physics work. Very interesting. Actually, this is one when we're done, I'm going to have to do a little bit of research because actually it is an excellent question. You're right, it is a hard one, and I'm not really prepared to answer it. But do you have a particular sort of time or a point when you think the most significant or the most rapid improvement in sort of human scientific knowledge was?
That's a good point. Yeah.
If you do, send us the question, and maybe we can argue it because maybe we disagree, or maybe you've got a much better answer than I gave.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Plus, I also don't know anything about 16th century or any of
Van
those.
Leeuwenhoek.
Yeah, right. And then Chris, thanks for the 5. What about a laminar flow, waterfall / water curtain? Would the flow be fast enough to absorb the heat and block the beam without punching through?
Yeah, I think it could be done. An interesting thing, I probably was negligent in not having tested water itself. It would have been relatively easy to just simply take, a cup with a tube or a spigot and just let a stream of water fall into a bucket. No dyes, no gelatin like in the ballistic gel, nothing, just water. And see what the effect would be, because there is absorption of water. And it also has the ability, with its turbulence and some of the mixing, it might create a little bit of diffusion and scatter, which is always going to be useful in any kind of blocker. I think, though, from a practical point of view, I wouldn't do anything other than sort of, oh, that's interesting, simply because the surface area of that wall, let's say we just needed a centimeter. You're probably going to need more, but let's say it was just a centimeter. You've got a centimeter of water that has to continuously flow down over a wall that's about 6 meters across, down a height of maybe 4 meters or something like that. You're going to need some really big pumps. So I don't think from a practical point of view, moving the water is going to be useful. It might be even better to dye it.
Okay. Yeah. Are you done? Because Ollie, he's coming back in here. It's like, Ollie, you gotta stop.
No,
Yeah,
don't stop. I like his
never mind.
questions.
Yeah, actually, yeah, never mind.
Yeah, don't listen to him.
Yeah,
I'm the
yeah.
one who...
Yeah, Ollie, thanks. Thank you very much. So he asks, let's hope this one sticks a while. Smiley face. Apart from securing the walls, what is the real goal here with the lasers? Shooting down naggy drones? ? Yeah. I bet if you use wet sandbags of some construction, can work quite well on Philippines question. Philip's question. Newton is the greatest time.
I kind of thought about that, and I think you might be right. I think you still might be right. My original one with the biological research was simply because of the human life impact. But Newton also made it possible for many of the advances in navigation. And so we're here in America, and it probably had a little bit to do with, the work that was being done with navigation and, the physics involved in building the machines that allowed us to do more sophisticated measurements. And I'll give it to you. All right. You're right. I was wrong.
Okay. Then Pharaoh.
Good discussion, though.
Yeah,
I like that.
Pharaoh for the 5. Thank you. Yeah, seriously, thank you. What about water vapor / mist chamber to scatter light or to an evaporative cooler style wall, a sponge / filter type material with continuous water flow?
Sponge makes sense because it's sort of like just a replaced volume of water. You just keep flowing it in. It's just like the fruit. You've got a mass of water and replacing it when it dries out. The problem we had with the towel was the fact that the towel, the blast went through so fast you couldn't get the distributed water through it or into the dry area fast enough before you punch through. So you would have to end up having a pretty high water flow. But for a one-time use, like we're probably only going to need this over this enormous wall once or twice. When the laser breaks, which it hasn't yet, or when we end up hitting a drone so fast that, we gave it a half-second dwell time, and all of that ended up in the back wall. Those are probably the 2 events. The mist and the absorption and everything, that just isn't going to work because even when we were going through those smoke plumes, I don't know if you remember seeing that one of the best was the russet potato, where you could look backward a good meter from the impact point on the potato, and you had all of this debris that was illuminated because it was white hot in the beam. It wasn't stopping it, and that debris included water vapor and particles of potato and everything else. It didn't stop it. So you'd need a huge amount of vapor, and we just don't have enough room in this building to put 5 or 10 meters of fog in order to absorb the beam. It's a practical engineering problem, not so much a physics problem.
Yeah, okay. And I have to read them.
Yeah.
And Philip, seriously, I don't know what the hell you're doing here.
Hey. Heck.
But seriously, thank you very, very much. And you didn't even ask a question on this one, so I appreciate your channel. Definitely, one of the best on YouTube. Keep up the good work.
Well, thank you very much.
We like that.
That's our goal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's really
nice.
worth a lot.
Yeah. And then Chris sent in 10. Thank you, Chris. Use humidifier filters for the moving water medium, smaller pumps. Also use doped water, it with nanoparticles.
I get it. Yeah.
Graphite maybe, that absorbs light and transfer heat to the moving water. I want to make sure.
It's kind of, I've sort of already answered it, but basically you need water flow, and no matter how thin it is, you're going to have to pump it over a very wide distance, and you can't have any areas where it's sort of streaming, getting thin, and you've got dry areas. So you're going to need some pretty big pumps. We could probably make the water opaque with something much less exotic and expensive than nanoparticles. Literally, we could just fill it with dye. We could fill it with anything that would be supported that would basically make it absorbent. And you probably have stuff in your kitchen you could actually do that with. But even just water-soluble dyes would be simple. It's really the pumping part of that it becomes really problematic. You have to capture all that water too and send it back up. The water filter, the air filter paper, it's probably not that much different than, like, say, using a towel or a cloth or something like that. It's much better formed, and we would probably save a little bit in terms of cost and building, but then obviously you're going to need a couple hundred of them in order to cover the whole wall. So it's probably a, apples and oranges kind of thing.
Yeah, okay. And again, Philip, please stop, please. But yeah, I know you can.
I can't tell what he's
beat
doing.
me later.
Okay, I'll beat you later.
Yeah. But then Tennessee Outlaw, thank you for the 5. Can I buy that weld lens with a hole burnt through it?
Which?
No.
Oh, you mean the welding lens? The
Probably.
welding? Oh, yeah,
Probably.
yeah. The one
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Probably not.
Well, I've still got
I
it.
don't know how you could ship
Did I
it.
throw
but
that away? Did I throw that away? I think I
you
might
did.
have.
I
might
did.
have. Yeah, you generally don't want to put that in your welding face mask, but if you really want one, get on Patreon. We can talk, and I could cut you a couple if you want.
No,
you know.
no. I'm trying to be the
committed one. Yeah, but
well, no, a different word
or
that I
you know
would
what?
use.
Well,
But
you know what we could do. Actually, it's a good question. If you really are serious, you're not just joking about it. When we do the video, I could just, when we're setting up, I could just burn a hole in a couple of those and just have them.
yeah, but that's gross. I wouldn't do that.
Well,
No, you send out things that you burnt holes in just because. I don't know. Okay, if you
we'll
want.
talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. But Philip, seriously, thank you. And also, yeah, maybe you could talk about this. It was mostly a comment that Philip gave, but in the he didn't say this. I'm adding words. I'm paraphrasing. So in the 1730s was when electricity was studied as a serious science instead of witchcraft.
Yeah.
So that was just a point. I think he was talking to someone else.
He was probably addressing, this whole question, this ongoing discussion we're having between, the most important time in science. I think an interesting.
Come on, Alex, let him make some money.
There's. We can get dinner tonight.
I'll shut up. I'll shut up. All right. Yeah, dinner.
There's sort of a meta discussion here because it's kind of like when you think about it, almost all of those phases of science, when we say, well, when was the greatest one? You can't take them in isolation. Like, I think there's a tendency to say, oh, well, we've got this one great scientist that discovered this fact, or even Einstein. A lot of these great scientists were working off the back. They were being supported by the work that was done by less famous or maybe less successful or less significant scientists. But it was the fact that we had the ability to write and communicate and interact over not just, a short distance, but over generations, that it allowed us to build to the level that we're at right now. You think about this. You've got a couple of guys in a warehouse using lasers based on quantum technology to burn holes in fruit. And we can do videos with you guys, show you this stuff, and in the afternoon, talk about it. And how would you improve it? Or what could you use it for? Or is it practical? Or where can I buy one? You think about the kind of stuff that's available to us now and the sources of information that we have, on the internet, the network society. It may be that the greatest point is actually now. It is last, 5-10 years and going forward into my son's generation, where people with good ideas or people who can leverage off of the information from before and analyze this kind of stuff is going to mean that the transition in science moved very slowly and had a couple of bumps with some of these, giants in the past. But it is accelerated as we have developed more of a foundation for all of these different fields. They support each other. Chemistry supports biology, and electronics and electrical knowledge supports, magnetism and construction and engineering and material science, and it keeps going up until we're reaching this level of AI, interconnectivity, and populist scientists that can share their information across the entire world on a Saturday evening. I think it might actually be that the real answer is right now.
Yeah. Okay. And then also, Arnie, I'm not sure exactly, Carlson, for the two, thank you. I'm not sure exactly what you mean. You said that you asked, what do the professionals use? Just asking.
Yeah. You mean the professional laser defense system builders?
Yeah.
They're using fiber optic lasers. That's pretty much it. There may be other things coming down the line, but I know at least 3 companies that are working with fiber lasers, and I've read a number of research papers about how they're doing what they're doing. Like I explained about the fiber combining capability to allow you to sort of multiply the effect. There's really no other laser out there that can do this, and that is has a large industrial base. So it's not $1 million laser. It's something you can go on eBay and pick up. So the pros, they can spend $1 million and they can have a system that is reasonably good. And so, no, it's fiber optic lasers. That's it.
Yeah, okay. So I picked out a random one.
Okay.
So what is the power source for the laser?
It's single phase 240 volt wall power going into the laser, which has a switching power supply that drives, I think it's about a dozen individual diode modules, like I showed you on the table in the video, that are fiber coupled into the cladding of the fiber itself. Actually, this might be a good opportunity while I'm talking. Alex, do you think you could pull up the video, the image that I had of the multi-clad, the blue image, and just show people what I'm talking? Yeah, that one there. Yeah.
Let me see if I can
See if you can put that up there.
display capture this.
Yeah. Now, it might be a little small above our head, but hopefully you can see the words.
Yeah.
But basically, what happens is, as I described in the video, if you want a very low-powered fiber optic laser, you can get them very inexpensively by having one diode module pumped with one little fiber that fires into that little green core, induces the ytterbium to fluoresce, produces the fiber laser output, much higher quality output than the diode that pumped it, and you have a fiber optic laser up to maybe 100 watts continuously. If it turns out that you want, like in our lasers, to pump that core much harder, it can handle much more power than you can get into it with a single fiber diode module. What you do is you will then fire the laser diode modules, their fibers, into that inner cladding, that light blue color around the green core. And you can put a whole bunch of them in because that inner cladding can be almost arbitrary in its diameter. It might be 10 times as large as the inner core. When you fire it in there, the outer cladding traps that fiber, that diode pumped laser light. It keeps it in that inner cladding. And so as it's zigzagging back and forth between the two ends of the fiber, it will occasionally pass through the core and dump a little bit of its energy. And it's going back and forth billions of times per second, and it dumps almost all of its energy into that inner core eventually. The core then is what is actually producing the laser output. So almost all fiber lasers that go above about 100 watts are going to have this double cladding design that uses multiple diodes in order to pump them. And in both cases, that outer jacket can be some plastic or a polyimide or something like that that simply provides mechanical protection so you don't scratch or crack these very delicate glass core, inner cladding, and outer cladding.
Yeah, okay. And then, Chris, thank you very much for the 10. Kind of a funny but interesting comment.
All right.
So make a slime sandwich.
I did this morning, but I didn't finish it.
Shouldn't have been drinking. Yeah. Outer board that the laser makes very small holes in. Pick a backboard that is more reflective. Period. In the middle, put some water with a thickening agent to minimize leaks.
I didn't think of that. One of the things that we were discussing is the idea of a, sort of an outer layer, inner layer, two sides of the sandwich, the bread, as the structural component, and then you put some gooey, absorbent, very high water content material. What I didn't think about is that the two pieces of bread don't have to be the same. You could, in fact, have an outer layer that, again, doesn't reflect. It's relatively thin. You're going to hit it, it's going to punch a hole, and the heat is now going to start to be distributed in the goo layer. But there's no real reason to put a material on the other side that has the same functionality as the front side, other than maybe you could reverse it if you ever had to, but I don't think that's ever going to be a need. Making it reflective, like a thin layer of aluminum or something like that, may then take that scattering cloud of photons that are leaving the hot zone, reflect them back into an even larger amount of that gel. That actually is a better solution. I think that, I like that idea. Yeah, thin wood, goo, and a thin aluminum sheet on the backside is probably the best. I might even test this.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks.
And maybe test that like for a Patreon thing, like
Yeah.
whether it works or
Yeah,
not.
because it's just a one test. It might be not enough to make a whole video. But actually, I think that is worth comparing to the individual components. I bet you it would work well.
Yeah. And then for Pharaoh, hopefully, I'm trying hard, guys. Yeah, but for the
Reading
five.
has always been one of his.
Yeah, well, I can read fine.
Okay. All right, I'll leave you alone. I don't have to read it, so I can make fun.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You can't even see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I can't.
Yeah. You want to take over?
No.
It's like no. Okay. Another option: laser points down at ground, lens / mirror / fiber, 2-point / direct at targets. E stop just pulls the lens / mirror out of the laser path.
Yeah, I don't hear. I know where you're going. I know it's a very abbreviated, but I kind of understand like what you're going at. We cannot redirect the beam. That's just a given. Assume you can't redirect the beam. And if we're going to be firing at objects that are, say, well above our head or at head level or ground level, the beam that leaves the beam director has to go horizontally from this level because we're going to be operating it from that table. So if you were to aim at the ground or you went at the ground, you're not going to hit your target. And you can't hit a fixed reflector, like my phone. You can't hit a fixed reflector and send it to the ground if the beam is in front or above or around. So the reflector would have to end up being over the entire back surface of the wall. But because it's so tall, the top of that reflector, in order to get the beam here and not back in our eyes, is going to have to have an angle maybe pretty close to 45 degrees. That means it's going to have to come forward that far in order to be able to do that reflection. And then you still have the problem of hitting the ground. There are objects on the ground. Not everything is going to be completely robust. And if we're just reflecting it, we're not spreading it. We have thousands of little bubbles on the surface that can diffuse it, but then they could send them in unknown directions. It's good in sort of principle to kind of think about, like, how can I put these 5 components together to end up with the result I want? But one of the major things that you can't forget is the engineering. If you actually had to do this yourself, because what we're doing, I bet you 90% of you could do if we just describe what we're trying to achieve. It's not that complicated. But if you get into the mechanics of how you're going to move all this around, how you're going to support it, that's where I think the problem comes in, not so much the physics.
Yeah, okay. And it just seemed like it was buffering for a bunch of people, but for the video, it should be totally fine now.
Okay.
For whatever reason. So, Jonathan, thank you for the Canadian 2. I have to say, it's Canadian.
Yeah.
But then also, you said,
Good people.
why not use a room that is below ground level? Well, I would say, yeah, we definitely would if we had that sort of money. It's like,
Yeah.
Donate how much? 5 million, 10 million? How
Yeah.
much? How much
That
should
you see,
take?
that's one of the problems you have when you're sort of, homegrown scientists like this. Like I had even joked about in the first video a few months ago when we brought this up, is like if we had access to a salt mine or we had a huge, like a cave that we could work in, it would be ideal. But we are really limited to this building. I mean, we're fortunate to have the building we do, and we just cannot locate this below ground. If we had like a white sands, range where you could end up, making sure that nobody could get within 20 kilometers of your test site, the hills would protect you. You'd be fine, and you'd have no fly zones above you. We're trying to match sort of kind of state-of-the-art, high-energy directed systems with homegrown kind of capabilities. And so there are going to be areas where we really are sort of out of our league. And the facilities that we need to test what we're doing are going to be out of our range and just not practical. And for most of our videos, if we're making sake, we don't need those sorts of capabilities. So we need to be able to adapt the existing facility in the least expensive, most effective, convenient way possible. And I'd hate to sort of restrict our zone of whatever to where we can put just concrete blocks. We want to show these things going all over the place, being almost impossible for somebody to be able to do this and let the computer just take everything out in half a second. That's what we want to do, and we'd like a big enough field of view that it's practical. So down underground, great, but we can't afford it. And above the ground, hopefully we can come up with something that's going to work.
Yeah, and okay, another super chat. Again, thank you for it, and apologize for my not able to pronounce your name. So I'm just gonna call you Carl, because of your middle name.
Okay.
And happy couple. I can see that in your little profile picture. So thank you for the 1500. Attach a woofer / subwoofer on the MDF
Okay.
to cause vibration should dissipate the energy similar to the baguette. So I'm thinking what he's trying to say is like sort of like, and it kind of would make sense to me, is if you had the baguette and it was just automatically like shifting
Right.
randomly.
Right.
That might be a way to be able to, dissipate the laser energy.
I think it would work. Obviously, when you're talking about a woofer, you're talking about electromagnetic coil that's moving back and forth with the dome, producing sound waves. Obviously, it moves in and out.
Yeah, but I don't think that was the point, though.
Well, I'm leading to it. Okay. So that's the kind of motion you would get with a subwoofer, with the driver pushing, the diaphragm. Obviously, it's not going to help if we bring the bread closer and farther because the beam is effectively collimated, or at that point, it's not going to get bigger or smaller. But if the driver were on the side and you were shifting the bread or the MDF or whatever you're doing sideways, that would work. Certainly for, not continuous operation over days, but we're talking about like a single event, moving it back and forth is going to make the burn pattern much more extended. It's going to make it much larger. It's going to take a lot longer to go through it. The question would be, again, just a matter of scale. If we need to move a large, say a whole, whatever it is in metric, but 4 by 8 foot sheet here, or maybe 2.5 by 3 meter sheet of MDF, it's heavy. Certainly if we soak it with water, we're talking, 100 kilograms or so. It's going to be pretty heavy. So the driver could still vibrate it sideways, but you might need some pretty potent drivers. And it might be something that would work if there's a particular location that we really want to protect because it's the one that's the most vulnerable to most of the shots. Then we might want to upgrade to, say, a dynamic solution, a water flow solution. Just more layers of material might be the solution.
Well, let me interrupt. This
Sure.
might be one where I sort of agree with him.
Okay.
Because why couldn't you apply that to anything that is you're trying to target something and you're using something to just shake it back and forth and you need it to be steady, whatever you're targeting. It needs to be steady for you to be able to burn a hole or be able to damage it.
Right.
And if it's not steady and it's moving back and forth.
Well, it has to move back. It can't move back and forth. If the beam is here, like say the beam is this way, and say this is the target, because I want to show the camera, you'll have to. Okay.
Right, yeah.
So if the target is moving back and forth like this,
Sure,
that
yeah.
won't help.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but say randomly. Like
Right.
say you could have it. And I'm trying to be devil's advocate here.
No,
So
I
it's
agree.
like, say it's rotating or something like that, but
Right.
it's moving a lot.
Right.
Where whatever you were originally targeting is no longer in the same place where it was.
Right. And I think the whole concept there, which is a good one, which is you're effectively doing the same you would do as if you move the beam fast. Like basically what you're doing is you're distributing the heat over a larger amount of material than a single hole, right?
No, but if you move the beam fast, it destroys the purpose of the beam. You need the beam to stay where it was.
What I
for
meant by
it to
moving the
be,
beam, what I meant
effective.
is the wall itself is vulnerable to the beam. Let's pretend the target isn't there. We're just talking about the back wall.
Sure.
As long as the beam isn't sitting in one fixed location, burning its nice way through the material.
Right.
If the beam were moving or the material was moving, it would
You're
mess
screwed.
you up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to screw the laser. Okay. So basically, movement, I think, is a viable technique.
Right, and that's why I think his point was like
And
valid.
some people have also recommended you just rotate something, like put a great big disc and turn it. Well, yeah, it's another way to move it. I think, though, what I'm trying to get at is I'm not saying that that's a bad idea, but I think it is an idea for limited application, just like fiber lasers are like a fiber defense system, is limited in a conflict. Like, how would it defend you? It's not going to solve all the problems. Motion will help, but because it means, mechanical movement and weight and everything, it's going to have an application that is limited to maybe the area where you are most concerned. You really want to make sure it doesn't burn through because it's constantly getting shot. So maybe you move the panel that is most likely to be the one that's going to be hit, and now the mechanics and all the things that you have to do in order to support it and move it become more practical because you're not moving that much. So it's a thought. I think we're going to have to consider that if these, how can I say it, differential material slime sandwiches don't work, or if I find when I put the wet MDF, it's still burning through too fast, we're going to have to do something. And it might be a combination of moving components as well as focusing on thicker materials in a particular area. It's still not completely solved.
Yeah. And, okay. So Angela Morley, thank you for the 2. And again, I'm sorry if I got it wrong. This is just light waves Fresnel lens wall. I assume that would be
could you
far
read that?
too.
Because I know the terms, but I don't know
Fresnel.
how the question was. Like, could
Yeah,
you just
this
read it again?
This is just light waves, a Fresnel lens wall.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, I know what you mean. Like, I know what a Fresnel is, and I know, like, how Fresnel lenses
And
work.
I think I'm pronouncing it right, but
yeah, it's spelled like Fresnel.
yeah, exactly.
But basically, I'm not sure exactly how the question applies to what we were talking about. Like, I understand those things, but I don't know what you mean by light wall. Could you just maybe just ask it again somehow? Because I would have to wildly guess. I'm not sure what the question is.
Yeah. Okay. And then let me move on to Jay Ingram. Thanks for the 10. Make a waterfall / use a 4 to 6 diameter pipe to dispense water from above the beam. Form a waterfall / backdrop. Use a reticulating pump alternative pipe with a hole filled with flowing water.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of like how, if I gave you the assignment, like say you worked here and you were our partner and you said, I can handle the flow situation. That's probably how you would set up a circulating water flow cooling system for a waterfall back wall. You would end up probably taking a big PVC pipe, drilling a whole bunch of holes in it, pumping water in it with a recirculating pump, and then allowing the water to flow down, maybe with little grids or something to distribute it nice and smoothly. That's how you do the recirculating water system. What I said earlier on, the only issue with any kind of a system with pumps and flows and all that is to cover a large area, you're going to need a pretty big, powerful pump with a lot of water. And I don't know how much you would need to be able to absorb that, but assuming that you dyed the water so it really absorbed it pretty well. It would work. Will it be as practical? I don't know. I have a suspicion it's one of those things where it sounds like simple, but once you get into the big pipes and you've now got dyed water that if it sprays, you know what I mean? Like, I got hit by the Red Bull spraying out of the can the other day, and I was a little sticky. And you can imagine if you had this like squid ink dyed water or some sort of dye, water soluble dye, and it's pumping out at 20 or 30 liters a second in order to, cover the wall. Something goes wrong, you've got a big mess.
Yeah, Felix, thank you very much for the 14 Canadian. I probably shouldn't say the type of currency, but
yeah.
Anyways, have you heard of coherent perfect absorbers? Have you heard of that?
Coherent perfect absorbers.
If you haven't, either way,
no.
A time reversed lasing material that and you could then dump the energy into water cooling and resistor banks.
You see, a lot of these solutions that are high tech are elegant, but they don't cover the large area. That's the problem. It has to be able to block a beam that's striking, 3 meters above my head or between us. And you can't capture it with a piece of equipment. You have to have a complete barrier all over the area because you don't know where it's going to hit it or when. So any of these sophisticated types of devices where you're going to try to, say, funnel the light someplace or send it, the device that does the gathering of the light is the area that's protected and only, no matter what you do with that light afterward, whether you send it into a beam dump, whether you just absorbed it into the material, it's only that area that's going to be protected. We have to protect the whole back wall. That's why we're looking at low-cost, low-weight materials that could block the entire back wall.
And then YT, YouTube watcher, thanks for the 5. And this isn't really a question, but thanks for the 5. On another note, pun intended, for safety, add an audible tone when laser is energized. Actually, that might be, even though it's like a super simple, like something I didn't even think about.
Like when we lock our doors?
Should. Yeah, right. Or if we have like a family member sitting over here, like when, if you saw, was it the last live stream or was it the one before that?
The one before that.
Before the last live stream. We had, a studio audience here. If they were talking to each other and they didn't know that something was going to happen in the background, it might be a good idea to have some sort of something going on. Yeah.
I don't know if you work or have ever been in sort of a university situation or an industrial situation with laser labs. I've never been in one where they don't have the big red light above the sign that says laser on. They always do that. And sometimes they have interlocking doors that also work with that, so you can't get in at that point. That's a good idea. We don't have that out here because we simply lock our doors and there's nobody else to come in unless they break in. So the point is, that still, though, is a really good idea because the circuitry is simple. We have trigger circuits, and there's actually 4 or 5 unused circuits for things like that. They're just low-voltage signals that could be sent to a light, a buzzer, theoretically, a warning outside the building, inform people what you're using. It would be very easy to incorporate that, and I'm going to do that. It's a very good idea.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you.
Yep. And then Felix, again, thanks again. I'm pretty sure I didn't reread this. I think you're adding on to your previous comment.
Okay.
So, Felix, so think of a desiccant wheel dehumidifier, but the wheel is covered in wet MDF and dipping in water? Question mark.
Yeah, so you're basically soaking, kind of like air conditioners do with their fan, to try to draw the water up in front of the condenser in order to cool them. Basically, I think that's how a lot of humidifiers actually work, is they just use the tub of water. They have an absorbent material. It dips down into the water. As it rotates out, it's all soaked in water, and then the fan carries the humidity into the room. Then it comes back down a little dried out, and you send it back down. It'd be an excellent way to moisten MDF if you had big wheels on slow-moving motors in sort of horse trough of water at the bottom, and you kept pulling up the water and going up, rather than some sort of waterfall where you pump the water up on top and have it drizzle onto the surface. 2 excellent ways to rehydrate your material, with the one advantage of your idea being that you also have a moving target. So you've got a wet moving target. That's pretty good. Yeah,
and Novelty Engine gave 5, thank you. But saying almost the exact same thing, saying maybe something like a belt, like a sanding belt, could provide a whole moving wall, could saturate it with water using towels.
Yeah.
So it's, exactly the same.
Yeah, maybe canvas, almost like sailcloth or canvas or something like that, where you cut large loops, large belts, and you have rollers in a trough of water, and you simply carry the water up. The one disadvantage of anything that's relatively thin and can go around the belts is it's going to be very thin, and you saw what happened with the towels. So it may not be enough simply because there's not enough water volume in the thin cloth material or the belt to be able to survive even the single hit for like a millisecond. It might not survive it. I like the idea of something thicker that's moving. Unless the belts could be made very, very spongy, you might actually be able to use a sponge material, as I'm thinking as I'm talking, as opposed to what I first described as like a piece of cloth. It might need to be something more like sponge.
Okay.
That would probably work.
And then Frederic or Frederick, thank you for the 20. A sandwich from a sandwich of front. I think sandwich from the front. SIC ceramic tile, middle, little sandbags of free-flowing micro-capsulated. I can't.
It's too complicated.
You have to actually. You know what? I want to see if you can. If you can come over here.
Bear with me for a
This will
second.
be a fun thing.
All right. A sandwich of 4 ceramic module.
the orange
Okay.
one,
Free flowing. Okay. Micro encapsulated erythritol or silicon micro encapsulated cooling dome with SC embedded water cooling. I think you're getting too complicated. The reason I'm saying that is that the real thing that's going to do this is water. And so most of the materials that support the water, whether it's a gel or it's a soaked piece of cloth or MDF or something, they're secondary. And to keep things inexpensive and convenient, you want that secondary support that really is only just a means of holding the water in front of the beam to be inexpensive and available. And if you start using materials that are themselves very expensive with maybe a small advantage in terms of the way that it functions, but we're really 95% benefiting from the water, I wouldn't get that complicated. I'd really try to make the solution elegant. That's why I like that suggestion about the sandwich with not having the same materials on both sides. It follows that same rule of KISS, and at the same time looks at like the advantages of each one of the materials, like how does it function, not just sort of saying, well, it's got to be the same stuff because you make sandwiches with 2 pieces of bread that always look the same. There's no reason why you can't put a bun on one side and you put a slice of, whole bread on the other side. You can change the design. That's the kind of solution we want, which is cost-effective, engineeringly practical, and at the same time, it works.
Okay, good. And then Ingram, thanks for the 10. Fish tank filled with black water. Beam enters a small hole inside of tank. Water will flow out of hole into collection pan and reticulate back into the tank. No giant pumps required.
Yeah, although you need a fish tank that has a surface area, like a dolphin tank at a, Shed Aquarium in Chicago or something
That
like
you're
that.
Also willing to destroy.
And you're willing to destroy it. And the pressure at the bottom is a lot. You're not going to get away with a little window glass. You're going to need
That's
some
true.
pretty heavy piece of material because you're talking about, to be 6 PSI? It would be half an atmosphere of pressure at the bottom of that tank because it's approximately 10 meters of water height is 1 atmosphere of pressure. So our atmosphere pressure at sea level, go down 10 meters, you have 2 atmospheres. Go down another 10 meters, 3 atmospheres. So at that height, you're talking about half an atmosphere of pressure. That's a lot of pressure. And so you're going to need a very strong tank. And then, like you said, you have to be willing to destroy it. So when you invest that much, you really don't want to throw it away when you're done. It's got to be simple.
Right. Yeah. Philip, thank you again so much. You're the best
fun.
one. Yeah. I'm having fun, and Philip is too.
Yeah. Okay.
What are your thoughts? Because this is separate.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on using a laser for your for a tractor beam?
Yeah, there were some studies done in liquids using lasers to actually move particles around by creating pressure differentials in the water. It's kind of interesting because you can use, say, triangulated laser beams to actually move a particle nanometer scale inside of a fluid. useful. And I think they might have even used that commercially, but certainly in practical research in microscopy to be able to sort of study individual cells. They were able to slide them around on a plate by using low-powered laser beams to create these small pressure differentials inside of the water. I don't think it has anything to do with quantum effects and wave effects. I don't think we're not at that sort of super sophisticated level. It's really a matter of thermal effects and the interaction of the laser with the fluid that surrounds the liquid to move the particles. But it does work.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Rigel, thanks for the 10. How about adding titanium dioxide powder to the water? It's better to reflect energy than absorb it.
Well, actually, we don't want to reflect it. As I was saying before, we don't want to reflect it. Do you remember from the video, if you watched it recently or if you have seen it, when we hit the foam board, the PVC foam board?
I can pull that up.
It was literally,
yeah,
if you would, because it was one of those things where it's like, okay, the laser's going to go on. We've got our laser goggles on, and the laser goggles are very specific. I should probably just review this with a few people that may not be familiar with them. They're not the same as sunglasses. They're not the same as welding glasses. What the laser goggles do is block specific wavelengths of light. So they're designed to block for certain lasers. So you'll order a laser goggles made for an argon laser or made for a fiber laser or made for a diode laser. Well, because they're very specific blockers, when we put them on, even though it looks very dark, they look like you're wearing a decent pair of sunglasses. They're not that occlusive to just general room lighting. You can function. That's why you need to have those kinds of goggles. Well, when that PVC foam board got hit by the beam, I felt like I was looking at an arc.
I think I have it here.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah, you just want to show that briefly?
Yep. Yeah, it's you tested it multiple times just to make sure.
Yeah.
So this is the second time, I think.
All right.
And those blocks were a bit of an issue, but...
Yeah, right. I should have practiced. But let's see if you can see it. But it was incredible.
Yeah, wait. Yeah. You're about to test it. Yep. 3, 2, 1, something like that. Yep.
It was so bright that I was seeing after images for a couple of minutes after that. So the titanium dioxide, which might actually be what takes this PVC foam material and makes it white. They actually might be using titanium dioxide. It's a very common white powder. It's used in almost all paints. The other question would be, not only do you not want to reflect it, I don't think it's water soluble. Titanium dioxide, I don't think, it may need to have some sort of a surfactant or some sort of a support, but I don't think you can take it and just mix it up and you get what looks like milk. I think maybe for a few seconds, but I think it'll just settle down.
Okay. And then something sort of, well, actually, it's about the Fresnel.
Oh, a clarification on it. You want me to read that one again, just because I was doing it the first time?
Well, no, I think this one I can read.
All right.
If I mess it up, then then scoot in. Right. So Jay, thanks again for the 10. I was also going to adjust a Fresnel wall lens wall. When the beam passes through, it will rapidly spread. Only a few feet needed to get below 1 kilowatt per square meter. Then you could absorb with solar panels.
Huh. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know about the solar panel.
And then we power the solar panels are fed into the laser, and then we reach some sort of like quantum effect where we end up destroying the Earth.
Infinite energy.
Right, exactly. Right. Okay. We did one on that. It got a lot of comments from a lot of people who were convinced that infinite energy was just a secret being withheld from them by powerful people. But nevertheless, it is an interesting approach. You would need some spacing, but they do have a fairly short focal length. In other words, when you hit a Fresnel lens, if anybody is not familiar with a Fresnel lens, let me just very briefly. Have you ever seen one of these inexpensive lenses that you can see on many lighting fixtures? What are you pointing at?
That camera.
Oh, okay.
If you want to talk.
Yeah.
About it,
If you look at a lot of lighting fixtures, you'll see that some of them actually have little plastic Fresnel designed beam spreaders. They're basically ridged, or they can even be done with points like little cones. But these things, if they're coordinated based on an expanding series of rings, they can change the focal length of the light hitting them. And they can be used as very, very inexpensive, flat light diffusers and light beam shaping equipment. They're used all over the place, and you can get them relatively inexpensively. I don't think the Fresnel lens that we could afford to buy, you know, something that isn't made out of quartz and, you know, coated in a national lab, would survive the beam. I think the lens itself probably couldn't handle it, because remember, it's going to be hit with the maximum intensity beam, which is hundreds of megawatts per square centimeter. It's going to be hit with the high-powered beam. So it probably wouldn't survive. If it did, I think that is the solution, because you're right. Within 10 centimeters, it spread the beam out, you know, 1,000,000-fold, and now it's just going to make things warm. And you could put almost any, you wouldn't probably need a barrier behind it, just the wall.
And Frederick sort of commented, thanks, thank you again for the 10. If you want a cheap solution, I've used sandbags in the past, mostly commenting to support you. So thank you.
Oh, okay.
But sandbags. So it's sort of what you used in the video, where it's like you just use thick bricks,
The concrete blocks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To be able to, you know, it's not what is the most effective method, but it's what you
cheap,
had.
and
Yeah,
it's what I had.
Yeah.
I'd say the only advantage to the sandbags as opposed to the concrete blocks is obviously you could build them to fit. You know, you could sort of make them of the right size.
Sure.
But if you did cut a hole in them, obviously the one or two of them would be damaged, and you'd probably have to clean up some sand. But I'm trying to stay away from anything that represents that kind of mass. You can imagine, 200 sandbags against that back wall, or 200 of these concrete blocks. It's heavy. It's heavy. We don't want to necessarily get into, like, you know, quantum blocks with, you know, phase reversal and all the rest of this thing. We also don't want to go to the idea of like something that's so heavy we can't move it. We're trying to find that middle zone with something that's practical, effective, inexpensive, and something we could test in a small scale examination here. The sandwiches based on the particle board or the foam board, maybe a gel and a encapsulating layer with aluminum or board on each side. I think this is probably going to be where we go, because if worst came to worst, we just put a lot of MDF boards back there, soak them with water, and we'll probably get away with it.
Yeah. And then Bart, I'm not going to even try. Thank you for the 10. Firehouse, one filled with sand and mounted vertical. I think what you mean is we have a firehouse on standby or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take your comment and add to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we probably don't do it on your own.
Yeah. Don't do it on your own, but at the same time, don't call up the fire department and say, gentlemen, we're going to be doing something so incredibly risky. We want you guys to all be in the truck just in case we need you. That's probably going to lead to more problems than solutions. So
yeah, you'll get a call back.
You'll get a call back, but not from the same guy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. They make a great video. Make sure the cameras keep running.
Yeah, right.
They're dragging me away.
Right. Angel, thank you for the 10. Orbids. If you want to look at it, yeah. AKA water gel beads, cheap any color.
Oh yeah. Aren't those? Can't you actually make them? I thought I saw a video once about that.
Maybe.
It's almost like, I don't know if you make them with molds or you just mix it up or something, but they form little like gelatin beads in a water or something like that. It's kind of interesting. It would have the one advantage if you could encapsulate the water in some way that isn't sort of soaked into a towel, but something that would, you know, you could dump in between two layers of material or something.
Would it be like one of these?
Yeah, they look like that. I'm not sure if you can make them yourself, but I'm not sure how they do that. It might be that they just need to use these running molds with, millions of little dents in them like ice trays. Maybe that's how they do them. But I thought I saw somebody, I don't think it was Nighthawk and Light. It might have been Applied Science or something like that. Ben is really interesting if you've never watched his channel. It's a bit of a, you got to make sure you have your coffee. But he's funny. He's got a good sense of what's interesting. And I think he might have tried to make those in the past. Because I don't think you have to mold them. Maybe to make them perfect, but not to make, encapsulated water beads. It's just gelatin, just a gelatin shell.
Yeah, okay.
Bath beads. Have you ever gotten those or smelled those in the store? I remember when I was a kid. They're little bath beads, and they have the sort of oils in them, and you would throw them into your bathtub and make it smell like lilacs or something like that. I didn't buy any, but I'm just saying, while my mom was shopping, I was looking around.
Yeah, I just don't want to make sure I'm not missing anyone here. So in Terry's polycarbonate panel filled with dyed water.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like I've been saying, in the past, don't want any free flowing water that's gonna be pouring into the room, especially if it's got a dye in it. If you've got a little bit of a gap here, I wanted to.
I don't really.
Okay, go.
But yeah, if you don't mind. But also there's a few and something.
And I'm not leaving to go to the bathroom. What I was going to say is I want to cover more about the fiber laser topic a little bit before we close down the live stream.
Sure.
And that I want to get to. So
yeah, that's fine.
I'll do it whenever you're ready. But if
and but also we weren't expecting these many comments and everything today.
We're trying to keep up with them.
Especially in the beginning. I'm not sure if all of you are here still from that issue that we had. But for whatever reason, it's doing great. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's a topic I really love.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you don't mind. So from Edo, Tiv, thanks for the 10 euros. Would it be better for the material to quickly vaporize and then have the vapor to be something that either scatters or absorbs the material, kind of like reactive armor?
Well, did you see the potato? If you go back to the video that we did this morning, where we showed what happens when you vaporize, the carbohydrates and the water and the proteins from that russet potato, and we struck it with a laser beam, you see a large sort of plume. I don't know if you were going to try to draw it up or not.
No, I can. Yeah,
but
sorry,
it might be worth seeing that for that purpose, and then I can address that.
Yeah, I can do that.
One of the things that any kind of absorbing material has to deal with is the fact that it's somewhat unpredictable, how much density you're going to get. You can't over-engineer it because it depends on how big the beam is, how long it's going to be on there. If it's sort of an uncontrolled source of vapor. It's different if you have a cloud chamber like we've got sitting behind us, where you've got a fixed distance and you can fill it with a certain density, and then you can test to say, is this enough or does it need to be denser? But when it's sort of willy-nilly on the fly, don't really know what you're going to end up getting for a level of protection. So that's probably not the way I would go. I would stick with solid materials that do it in the solid or liquid phase, and any kind of mist or particulates, smoke that you get out of that. That's sort of a side benefit. Maybe it helps a little bit. Maybe it augments the performance, but you don't end up with dependence on that evaporated or ablated material.
Yeah, I'm trying to find your potato.
Yeah, you keep looking. While he's
tested many fruits, it was definitely before the egg.
It's fun to watch these things again because we lived through it, and now we get to see it again, see what we're doing.
So it's definitely before. Well, I'd like before you continue. Let me see if I can actually.
All right.
Find it. Yeah, so definitely before your ballistic gel.
Yeah, right.
So probably.
No, actually, I think it was after the ballistic gel.
I thought it was. I'm pretty sure it was before.
Well, good luck.
I was the one who edited it. If I get this wrong, then
We'll see. It's going to be a test.
Actually, yeah, you might be right.
One of the things I was also going to go over before you leave, if the questions begin to thin out over the next half hour or so, is there are several different ways that they've looked at fiber lasers for directed energy systems to be able to use them as a single beam. And there's some arguments for doing that or not doing that. As I said here, we're going to be using 2 parallel beams and striking the target about 1 centimeter apart with 2 very powerful beams. With the kind of targets we're looking at with the drones, it's probably going to be equally effective. If one isn't hitting an important component like a battery, maybe the other one will hit an important electronic component and damage it. And so one method for dealing with multiple laser inputs is to do nothing. Just run them all in a grid of very high power independent beams that are going to punch holes in various areas. Is that the potato?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
So you see the plume coming out of the front of that? That's basically a bladed material. It's white not because of the light that's produced, not the laser. You're not seeing the laser. You're seeing the laser path. What you're seeing is the white-hot vapor and liquids and carbon and all of the material that's burnt out of the hole. That's what's producing that plume. So effectively, that is an absorption medium that would be similar to a fog or to particulate matter that you designed into your system. But it's clearly not protecting the potato. It might be helping, but it's not sufficient. You still need the potato. So I think what we could do is take advantage of maybe the front surface material. Would be good if it did ablate, in addition to holding back the slime layer, in addition to providing support for the structure with the back wall that may now be made out of aluminum or some lightweight reflective material. The other system that they have looked at in beam combining is called wavelength division multiplexing, or essentially the way that you can send several different colors of laser down a fiber. You can send a blue, a red, and a green laser beam. They don't talk to each other. They work independently of each other. Well, you can tuck those wavelengths in very close, so you can deal with wavelengths that all look to be the same color. They're all in the near infrared around 1080, but they may be at, say, a few nanometers apart, but they're still in that same general wavelength range. The way the wavelength division multiplexing works, and it sounds real fancy and you sound like you're smart, but actually it's a very simple concept. Take a prism, place it in a beam of white light, sunlight will work, and you'll end up getting a nice spectrum, a rainbow from the blue to the red. You can see that on the table below the prism. Okay, that's taking sunlight and spreading it out into a series of different wavelengths. Well, what the wavelength division multiplexing does is it simply reverses the process. You have a blue laser, green laser, yellow laser, red laser, and you angle them such that they all enter the prism at the same point. When they leave, they then end up leaving as a single beam that contains all those colors. You've essentially reversed the effect and sent the sunlight back to the sun in a single white beam. You can tune individual lasers to operate at slightly different wavelengths. It's the nature of the doping. It's maybe you would even use different dopants. But the point is, you can produce multiple wavelengths, send them in through a wavelength division system, either it's a diffraction grating or a prism, and end up combining them because they all come in at the appropriate angles to end up as a single beam. That's one way that they've looked at trying to put all of these multiple lasers into a single output beam that makes the optics a lot easier downstream. So I thought I would just cover that with you because it's some of the things that they're doing out there to make the kind of systems that you're seeing here on the very smallest scale of this program of developing these things. It's the same sort of problems that they're struggling with, but they've got good solutions.
Yeah, okay. And I just want to get through these because I don't want to leave anyone out.
Good.
So, Johnny, thanks for the 5. Have you considered using a spatially separated array of less powerful lasers?
Well, kind of like I just said, we're using 2.
Right.
But I would not go to low-powered lasers because obviously you'd need thousands of them to get to the energy levels that you need. What we've done here could be upgraded. We've got two because I actually wanted to study the idea of not using just a single beam and a single mirror and a single lens. I wanted to study how we can pack them and what are the interactions between the systems. That's why we have two. We could have gotten a single laser of double the power for about the same cost and decided to do the two to allow us to study that. But it looks good. And so there's no reason you couldn't put 9 lasers through the system that we've built right here. It would accommodate them. We wouldn't even have to modify it. We'd just have to get some new wall outlets and put in the lasers. It's that simple. Once you go beyond that, we would need bigger optics. But once you've proven that you can go to 2, 9 becomes not much of a jump. And once you've proven you can do 9, you could do 100. So you could go up to the big boy range with the kind of system that we're designing here. You just have to scale everything, but you'd know where to go.
And Glenn, thank you. You mentioned both applied science and Nighthawk and Light, and then said Ben's channel is good.
Yeah.
Well played, sir.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good comment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there's a lot of other channels. I mean, we're going to be reaching out to Styropyro, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. BPS Space, I would like to talk to. Sabina, Hassenfelder. Yeah. There's probably a dozen, and I apologize for not bringing up names that are actually near the top of the list, but there's just a lot of people that we want to contact and see if we can have a one-on-one discussion about their projects, things that they think they would like to work on, how they got where they did. Maybe be helpful for some of the viewers here that are kind of into YouTube and into doing channels. Maybe they'll be technologically related. Probably, if you have an interest in this channel, there's a good chance they would be. But a lot of the same rules apply to cooking shows and travel shows and anything where you're sort of trying to transfer accumulated knowledge and some experience in an area to an audience that has some experience in the area but can benefit from that, experience or extra insight that you have. So a lot of the same rules would apply and a lot of the same how'd you get where you got to and where'd you come from and all those kinds of questions. And what would you suggest we do to make what we're doing a little more interesting and better? So those are the kind of outreaches we're going to do. And I think those will be fascinating because, it'd be fun to get into an argument with one of these guys or, be asked some questions that, we don't think to ask ourselves because, we haven't talked to them. So we're going to get there. We're going to do that.
Yeah, okay. And just to finish up some of the other questions.
Yeah.
So Sam J, thanks for the 5. How exactly does the laser not destroy the glass in the fiber, but destroys the glass you shot it at?
Fiber lasers have an extremely high quality of glass. It is there is a limit, but it's much beyond what typically lenses can handle. The real breaking point, typically with most optics, is not internal. It's not the light as it's transmitting through the mass of the material. Generally speaking, it's always going to be ultra clean. And it's at the interface with a different medium when you end up getting reflections that can concentrate the light, very, very tiny defects in those surfaces. That surface can cause focusing, or it can cause phase interaction when you're dealing with coherent light. So typically when you take a lens that's, say, anti-reflection coated, perfectly clean, hit it with a laser beam, and keep pumping up the energy, typically where the first damage is seen is on the coatings, the surfaces, where those interactions and those transitions occur. Within the bulk, you usually have to get to much higher energies in order to actually do bulk damage, but you can. So with the fiber lasers, typically the most vulnerable part is the ends of the fibers, but that's also the same with the lens. The lenses we're using are very high quality. They're 20th wave, super polished lenses in the area where the beam is super intense. And they're perfectly fine. But when you get the beam down to a few microns in diameter, which they can achieve, you're going to damage even a fiber. And that's why one of the reasons why the fibers are actually larger than the telecommunication fibers in the 2, 3, 4 micron range. They have to be bigger to handle the higher power range. Go much bigger to higher handle, more power, and the beam quality begins to drop. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, okay. And then if you be able to, and if you don't mind, guys, because we're probably gonna be, signing off pretty soon.
Okay.
So anybody who wants to get their like final questions in, do it now. And thanks for the other questions. But I was wondering if you could read this one.
All right.
Because
Hang on a
you'll be a little bit better. All right. I would.
Little logistics here.
Yep.
Okay. Mega layers, hardboard with MEF, thin layer of translucent gel doped with diffuse refractive light.
Okay. So I'll read it out loud because I've made that mistake in the past.
Yep.
Okay. Hardboard, then MDF, then a layer of translucent gel doped to diffuse, refract the light, then second layer of dyed gel to absorb, then the back layer with polished aluminum to reflect. Yeah. That's a small modification of what was explained before with respect to the MDF, the absorbent layer, a reflective layer. We could probably play around with different types of absorbent layers. How much MDF do we need? Maybe we go to plywood. Who knows? It's stronger. And then the aluminum layer on the back. There's a variety of ways that we can skin the cat, but I think those three components are the leading contender at this point. I really do like that.
Okay. Then another one, Jay Ward, 5, thank you.
Yep.
Ultimate weapon, maybe megawatt class, average power with pulsed super high instantaneous power as well as frequency chirping to find max absorption.
Megawatt is not, I think there are probably some of the major systems out there that have already approached or exceeded a megawatt. What they advertise or what they talk about in the journals is not going to be what they're doing in the labs. And megawatt is absolutely doable.
Yeah,
There's no problem
on
with
ships
that.
and everything
Yeah,
like that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Of course. Yeah.
So megawatt is possible, and it's probably been done, and it probably is even deployed. But with respect to the pulsed, no, I don't think so. Because, see, the problem is pulsed lasers tend to be overall, on the average output, lower. What they do is they benefit from the fact that they have the high pulses, the high pulsed or peaked energy. But the optics also have to be exposed to that. And it's often the optics in those systems that are going to be the limiting factor. So if you actually want to put the most amount of calories or joules into your target, you're probably going to get more into them by filling up 100% of the time while the beam is on. Shortening the pulses, doubling the intensity, but cutting them down to, say, half as many pulses per second is probably not going to make much of a difference, and again runs damaging problems with the fibers and the optics. The chirping is interesting, but again, you're not going to be able to chirp much in terms of the wavelength because the optics are all going to have to handle the different frequencies. And the absorption or the reflection of the surfaces is not going to be that finely tuned. They're not going to coat these things in optical coatings that can reflect only, say, at 1080, but not at 1077 or not at 1083. So I'd say I'd work more on just high-speed tracking, better optics, get to higher, more efficient energies, longer duration operation of the fibers, more robust, smaller, raise the percentage efficiency just 1 or 2%, and you may save a tremendous amount of power and make them more deployable. That becomes just an engineering question, but not an optics one.
Okay, and then from Lars about target designation, your thoughts on phase conjugated beams that counteract diffraction for shooting down the target. May be difficult, but even a desktop demo would be super cool.
It would be cool, and I know what it is. Basically, what you're doing is you're almost with what he's getting at. For those of you unfamiliar, I don't want to talk too technical. I want to explain it in the general principle. Basically, what you're doing is you're interrogating the target based on its reflection to determine sort of what the phase interaction with the laser beam that you're actually wanting to fire is going to be. It's almost like doing focusing on the fly, is basically you're phasing the beam on the fly in order to be able to get it to interact most efficiently and reflect most efficiently at the target level. And it does work. One of the problems that I think is probably a deal killer with respect to that is you're talking about real-world conditions over distances of like a kilometer. I don't think you're going to get phase maintenance over those types of fields of view because you're traveling so far as the density of the air and air currents and humidity are interacting with the beam. Those wavelengths can change ever so slightly, unpredictably, even on the way out and the way back. I think it would be overcomplicating it. I think the absorption is going to be sufficient with most practical materials. And I think, again, I would focus on the engineering of getting the beam there as fast as possible, keeping it on target, and having enough resolution in your cameras that you can slice the blades off the drones rather than just trying to hit the body. That can lower the energy. More of a phase designation, more of a AI type of where do we need to hit an object that looks sort of like this for how long in order to generally take it out. That's the kind of science that I think needs to go into these kinds of systems because they're all electronically controlled.
And then Felix, thanks again. I think combining multiple close frequencies in one beam would create some weird beat frequency and constructive/deconstructive interference? Question mark.
It might, but generally speaking, if you know what a frequency comb is, lasers have been built that can produce thousands of very narrowly spaced wavelengths, peaks, very specific, very accurate peaks, but very close to each other from a single laser. They produce a comb of spectra. And I haven't really heard about the interaction of those beams, but because they're so narrowly spaced, beat frequencies depend on the spacing of the original beams, or the original frequencies. A beat frequency in audio is where you can take two speakers and set them up with a very slightly different frequency, say 300 hertz and 301 hertz. And you hear this low hum, this. But then what will happen is because they're off by 1 hertz, you will also get a beat frequency when they're both playing at you. So it goes at the beat frequency, the differential frequency. And that is what could occur between very narrowly spaced laser beams. But remember, if they're very narrowly spaced, the beat frequency is going to be far away from what's going to be able to get through the fibers, the mirrors, or anything else. So I don't think I would be too concerned about that kind of interaction, not in a practical system where the wavelengths are that close together.
Okay. So I'm going to leave Philip for the last one.
Okay.
Because we have two other ones here.
Yeah.
And both, thank you, Sam J. and Rick. I thank you both. We do really appreciate it.
Yeah.
But also, yeah. So Rick, waterproof fiber cement board plus hydrogel layer? Question mark.
It's an option. Cement board's kind of heavy, and we're not going to be depending on too much the material that's encapsulating it. But when I do the test, and I will get back to you probably on the next live stream after we do some of the testing, I will test a number of encapsulating materials. I will try MDF, plywood, might try some cement board, and then a back wall of maybe similar materials, or maybe trying the aluminum, and then filling it with a number of materials that would be wet. My suspicion is it's going to be wet towels or something that's easy to kind of pack in there and flood with water. But I'll test those because they're all basically variations on a theme.
And then Sam J, thank you. How do the laser glasses block the wavelength without themselves burning out?
Okay.
Where does the energy go?
Well, in some of them, it's just a material absorption. Like if you get what's cobalt glass bottles. These used to be, they've been around for 100 years. The glass itself is blue. You crack them and you look all the way through it, it's blue. It's filled with a dye or a mineral that effectively absorbs that wavelength of light. So if you had a blue laser, you could literally take these old, 200-year-old, bottles and put them in front of your eyes. They'd be a laser blocker. You can see the room in all the other wavelengths, but it will absorb the laser light. In general, laser goggles are not designed for high energy beams. Because they absorb all that light. So they're just like a piece of plexiglass, or they're like a piece of plastic, or in some cases glass. But they're delicate, and what they're doing is your eyes are enormously more delicate than the glasses themselves. So a beam that hits your glasses doesn't even make it warm, but could permanently blind you. The reason for that, the reason the eye is so sensitive, is because we've got a lens here. And that lens focuses that perfectly coherent beam down to a micron-sized spot on your retina in the back of your eye. So it will focus that light down 1,000-fold or 1,000,000-fold, and so you get very, very hot spots, and you can actually look into an eyeball that's been hit by lasers, and you'll see little weld marks, little burn spots on the back of the retina. That's why the eye is so sensitive. That's why your face doesn't need goggles, even though you've got these in front of your eyes. The other method is to actually dope it or coat it with special coatings that are designed to block a certain wavelength range, just like you have anti-reflection coating on your glasses, designed to transmit the visible light rays through so that you can see well and you get a lot of light. Well, you can coat them to do the reverse, to block certain wavelengths based on what those goggles are made for. If you get a pair of laser goggles, they're designed for very specific lasers. The ones we're using are for neodymium YAG and for ytterbium. They're basically around the same wavelength range, about 1.08 microns. But you can get other ones made for argon. You can get other ones made for diode lasers. They tend to be orange because they block blue light. So that's why they're not damaged. We're only talking about protecting the eyeball, and we're not blocking high energies.
Yeah, okay. And then Philip, thank you so much, Philip. You're definitely our top commenter. Thank you. So he asked or commented, do you believe there is any way to use laser technology to circumvent the effects of rain or bad weather? Weather and air pollution could be a significant deterrent of effective systems.
No, I think for a number of reasons. Number one, lasers, the benefit of lasers is their coherence and your controllability. If you want a cheap source of a lot of light energy, these LEDs lighting up this room is a much better way to do this from lasers. But lasers, because of that frequency capability, allows you to tune it to interact with materials much better than just the white light coming out of these LEDs. The problem with weather and anything like that is you're always talking about huge scale. You're talking about systems that involve terawatts of power, just a simple storm that's moving through your area. To be able to influence its movement or be able to influence its evolution, you'd need so much laser power or energy deposited in the system. It's just not practical to build them, even if they were mobile enough to move them where you wanted them to be for that weather mitigation purpose. But the other thing is also, you're going to be putting a lot of energy into the open sky. That's the reason for this whole video and this discussion is we got to stay inside. So if you're going to put a terawatt laser beam into the sky to try to prevent a storm or to redirect its flow, now you got other issues about sending that much laser light, if you could even generate that much, into the sky. I don't think for weather mitigation. What I think the lasers are going to be used for a lot more is LiDAR and for investigating like substances. Like you can use transmission through a plume of gas, not just be dependent on sunlight or its own radiative colors in order to determine what toxins or gases are in there. Very low power. I can get into eye safe in another video. I'm not going to do it now. But basically, there are certain laser beams that aren't dangerous to our eye for various reasons. Those can be used to interrogate plumes, highways, shipyards, factories, all biological, farmyards, all of this sort of thing can be investigated by lasers to determine toxic gases or that sort of thing, that could be very, very useful. And it's being done now. I think it's just going to expand as the lasers become more efficient and as the detectors become more efficient and more mobile and robust.
Yeah, is there anything quick that you'd be able to say to Novelty? He asked how might coagulated blood perform?
I assume you mean for the lasers.
Yeah, I would hope
no
so.
vampires
Yeah,
here, right? I don't know, but you can appreciate the fact that I don't want to test it. But the thing is, I could get meat, but it's going to be basically red, so it's going to absorb blue light very effectively. But it is just it's a biological source of an absorptive material. So it'll work just as well as dye that you could buy in the grocery store.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, this was good. I really had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was good. And if any of you didn't see the first part of the live stream, or if you're watching this later, you can obviously go to the previous one where it just randomly cut off.
Yeah, like 10 minutes or something,
yeah.
or 5 minutes.
I don't know the reasoning behind that, but yeah, if you want to see the first part of it, you can.
Thanks for recovering it.
Yeah.
He was working like a crazy
man.
man.
I was losing my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, but he got it back
But it
up.
worked. It worked.
A little heads up, too. I'm sure we are not going to release a video next Saturday. We won't be ready with a video. So you don't have to bother checking in the morning. And I really don't think we're going to do a live stream that night. I don't have anything lined up, but it's a possibility. So I think what we can do, just, if we got an interview or something like that and somebody had to do it right away, but I think it's a low probability. So you might check out in the afternoon, just see if we're going to do something. But otherwise, I expect it'll probably be about 2 weeks before we do our next Saturday release and live stream.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I appreciate your help and everything like that. This is a lot of fun. I love lasers, and this is going to be a great project moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And Philip, I have to say, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philip.
Top notch.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you guys.